So we do a Docomomo pop quiz, and I was just, everybody's used to the pop quiz. It's new, sorry. It's going to be a challenge. So, Kim, welcome. Chris, nice to see so many friendly faces. We got Docomomo board members in the house. Tracy, Scott, thank you for coming. Some people from MyEd, thank you. We're going to talk just a little bit about Docomomo, Wisconsin. So we have a new pop quiz. Everybody recognize this building? Okay. So in what decade was it done? Don't shut it out. Don't shout it out. I'm going to say, okay, 1900 to 1910. Let's see a show of hands for that. So this is the Allen Bradley building, right? On the skyline. It's a feature of Milwaukee skyline. So how about 1910 to 1920? 1920 to 1930? 1930 to 1940? Okay, we've got three very weak hands. 1940 to 1950. Okay, in 1950 we have half the group. 1950 to 1960. Okay, these are ringers because they know the answer. He just looks smart, so I have a feeling he knows the real answer. Might have worked on, no. All right, 1960 to 1970. You guys are too good. Okay, 1964. Wow. So this is really important because most audiences will say late 19th century. I say no. Some will say 1920s and 30s. And that's a pretty good guess because the original Allen Bradley was an Italianate structure designed by Fitzhugh Scott and Associates in the 1930s. But you can see what happened when modernism took hold after the war. These are also Fitzhugh Scott and Associates for the research building and the clock tower. And so the clock tower, it's hard to believe Milwaukee's lakefront without Allen Bradley, but it didn't exist until post-war. So really the Milwaukee lakefront is a function of, was generated in the post-war years. So here's an idea for the bridge over 2nd Street, and here's up above, just beneath the clock tower. So you can see the modular prefabricated panels that were used, both glass and concrete. And here it is at night. So this is that great skywalk above 2nd Street, as it was intended with built-in lighting and the color of the panels. These are painted aluminum. So this is the kind of thing that we try to bring people's attention to. So what is the role of mid-century modern? Do people realize that Milwaukee was a riverfront city until the Second World War, and only after the Second World War became a lakefront city? So we try to raise awareness of the great modern landmarks, mostly of the 20th century. We document, we conserve, we celebrate the modern movement in general across the state of Wisconsin. And so our mission is to build a building registry, which I want to thank Dave Erickson. He's here behind the camera, as always, for us, documenting the evening. But he has put together a registry of over 1,400 buildings across the state of Wisconsin and continues to build that with volunteer help. And we also do lectures and exhibitions. We've got a Frank Lloyd Wright, it's not a Docomomo exhibition, but there's a great Frank Lloyd Wright furniture chair exhibit at MOA, so be sure to catch that. And we'll be doing some other events, Michael P. Johnson, Wensler, well-known architects at mid-century in Milwaukee and around. Our latest project is, of course, the work of Alonzo Robinson Jr. I'm very honored to have Kim Robinson, Alonzo Robinson's son, here in the audience tonight. We're really proud of the advocacy work that we've been doing recently. This is Pilgrim Rest Church, the bottom right. So this was the first set of drawing documents, of working documents submitted by an African-American architect in history to the Wisconsin Architectural Archive, where we are tonight. So thank you to Kim for arranging that and making that possible. And you see Central City Plaza at the upper right, which is at 6th and Walnut. Okay, that's decided not to work, which was the focus of our latest advocacy effort. So that was threatened with demolition. Just 1 year after the building at the bottom left, which is the Downtown Fire Administration Building. That's the headquarters of Milwaukee Fire Department, which is now the Alonzo Robinson Jr. Fire Administration Building. So nobody knew about Central City Plaza. And fortunately, with the efforts of Docomomo, Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, this guy back here, I need my, oh, there he is. This guy right here in the audience, Chris Root, thank you to his designation efforts, we were able to save the building. So we have Emma Rudd from the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance, that's Seth Terhar, Docomomo Fellow and Program Manager, there's Kim, and everybody got together and was able to rally efforts with the community. So this is LaShondra Vernon in the center. She was part of the Bronzeville Advisory Committee. It was a grassroots effort. We, instead of trying to fight through the city, we went directly to the owner. And we got voices in the community together to explain why the building was important and the legacy of the building, which the Salvation Army, who owned one of the buildings on the site, had purchased another. They had no idea who the architect was. When they learned, they actually pivoted 180 degrees and said, we not only want to save the building, but we want to do a historic site and celebrate the work of Alonzo Robinson on the site. So they're very much on board now. And it was very nice because Docomomo US gave an award to the Wisconsin chapter for this advocacy. There's Kim accepting the award just last week in Chicago. And so we continue to take an interest in voices all over the state of architects and designers who have not seen the limelight that they were due during their lifetimes. And so we're collecting information on Alonzo Robinson to do an exhibit in the coming months. Not years, right, Kim? Coming months. And here we are with Brooks Stevens today. So this work comes as a result of the in-depth research that Michael Bridgeman has done on Brooks Stevens and the Brooks and Alice Stevens house, which will be part of Milwaukee Moderns in the coming months as well, we hope. So Michael worked for many years for Madison Public Television, Wisconsin Public Television, retired and has been writing on architectural history for a variety of organizations, the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation. He's had more than 40 years serving on its board, preparing and leading historic architectural walking tours, and for the last 6 years, he's been writing countless, over 50 web posts about Madison area architecture. He's hosted 2 PBS Wisconsin programs. We actually met at Remarkable Homes of Wisconsin. Did anyone see that show? Oh man,
we'll show that
I feel
next
deflated
time.
now. So Michael and I met on that. He was the narrator. He interviewed me about the Brooks Stevens house. That was some years ago. We were both a lot less gray at that time. But he's back to talk about the subject, which he knows well. So I will turn it over to Michael. Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Eric. I just want to check something. If I move around a little bit, can you still hear me? Because I will get restless if I am tied to the podium. But I will also be here.
Do you want the microphone? Because we can turn it on and you can actually pull it out.
I didn't know it was not on, because we tested it earlier. I assumed it was on.
No.
It's probably that one. There, okay. It may be better if I'm on the microphone, but I may move around. So if you can't hear me, just let me know, or I can.
You should be able to remove it. There we go.
Oh.
There we go.
Now you
unleash the real Michael Bridgeman.
You may now get the lounge act. No, don't worry, that will not happen. Thanks to Eric for the introduction. Most of what he said is true. And my first encounter with the Brooks Stevens house was, in fact, when we did Remarkable Homes of Wisconsin, which was a 1-hour program for PBS Wisconsin. And that was about 11 years ago. And so Eric and I have kept in touch. We've had breakfast together in Madison, et cetera, et cetera. So when the time came, he asked if I would write the chapter on the Brooks Stevens house for Milwaukee Moderns. And I said, yes. And that in turn has led to tonight's presentation. Now, something I need to make clear is that my focus is on the house, the Brooks and Alice Stevens house. Number one, I will always try to call it the Brooks and Alice Stevens house, because that's become the standard approach nowadays. There was a time when the name of the male member of the couple was all that was attached to historic properties. That has changed, and Alice certainly played a role. Exactly what role is a little unclear sometimes, but she deserves recognition as well. But I focus on the house. Brooks is well known as an industrial designer in Milwaukee. No question about it. There are books about him, there have been museum exhibitions about him. So while I touch on that, my primary focus is on the house itself as let's try this again. Well, it worked earlier.
It did. There we go. Maybe point it at the screen a little bit more.
Is on the house itself, which, as the Milwaukee Sunday News Sentinel wrote in November of 1940, the Stevens home is the embodiment of its owner's design for living as he sees it. The Brooks and Alice Stevens house is a personal statement and an enduring example of modern American architecture. The house was built in 1939, and it's a dynamic, assured, and above all, modern house. The same could be said of Brooks Stevens as a person. He was an industrial design pioneer, as I think you probably know, and his energy and ideas shaped his family's home as much as it shaped his successful business. The house and Stevens are both exemplars of the machine age, a period stretching from the economic boom of the 1920s through the 1930s and the bust of the Depression. I'm doing something wrong. There. These are some examples of machine age promotion and design. In the machine age in America, architectural historian Richard Guy Wilson wrote about that period when, as he said, the machine in all its manifestations, as an object, a process, and ultimately a symbol, became the fundamental fact of modernism. Among the several styles of the machine age, streamlining ended up dominating industrial design in the 1930s. Its smooth lines, its implicit efficiency were an antidote to the economic turmoil of the Great Depression. Streamlining shaped everything. Okay.
Maybe I can do it from here, and you can just tell me. Just say next, Michael.
Okay. Streamlining shaped everything, from steam irons to steamships, from tricycles to locomotives, and gas stations to office buildings. But streamlining was rarely used in designing single-family homes, and I would argue it was never done better in Wisconsin, certainly, than at the Stevens house. Brooks Stevens was an ambitious, charismatic, and talented person, qualities evident when he and his wife Alice, still in their 20s, built their house in what is now termed the streamlined modern style. Now, it's important to know that Brooks Stevens would not have used that term himself. In that same 1940 article, he told the reporter for the Milwaukee Sunday News Sentinel that he refused to use modernistic or streamlined. He found the terms inadequate, gauche, and passé. Well, the ultimate name for an architectural style is often conferred well after it was in vogue, and architectural historians have generally settled on streamlined modern for the name over art moderne, modernistic, or art deco for that sort of style expressed in the Stevens house. A little side note, my favorite source for this are the books by Marcus Whiffen. He has style guides, and he has a good short chapter on streamlined modern as a unique style separate from art deco, and they're often conflated. Clifford Brooks Stevens was born in Milwaukee in 1911, and like his father, he attended Cornell University, where he studied architecture, and he spent his summers in the office of Eschweiler and Eschweiler, then the city's most prominent architectural firm. As the economy bottomed out in 1932, architects, like so many others, were scrambling to find work, and Brooks Stevens chose to leave Cornell in 1933 without a degree. Back in Milwaukee, he soon found another outlet for his creative drive, the burgeoning field of industrial design, where he would have a big impact over a prolific 50-year career. Growing up, Brooks Stevens lived on North Stowell Avenue in a large turn-of-the-century wood frame house. He lived there with his parents and his sister. When he was 8, he contracted polio, and encouraged by his father, he took to drawing with his good left hand. While bedridden, he also built models, swam, and he, importantly, visited car shows with his father, sparkling a lifelong passion for automobiles. The elder Stevens was an executive and engineer for Cutler Hammer, a major electrical equipment manufacturer. He told his son about a blind competition to redesign the Cutler Hammer nameplate. Brooks submitted an anonymous proposal, which was selected by a jury. Sparked by this early achievement, the young Stevens, who had turned 24, recently turned 24, opened his design office in 1935. He said, quote, "I had to fight my way into talk to anybody in the 30s. He was quoted in his obituary for saying that, his obituary that appeared in the New York Times at the time of his death. He added, "I had not only to justify myself, but to justify my profession." His business was a success from the start. He benefited from family and social connections, to be sure, but Cutler Hammer was his first client. But he was also a very good and a very determined salesman. Now, this view of his office from the early years, I think, is worth some attention. We don't see Brooks Stevens here. This photo is from about 1935. It's an early office, if not, in fact, his very first office. For one, the photo mural on the left shows before and after views of an Alice Chalmers tractor. The Brooks Stevens update is on the left. The photo mural on the right is a van with a beetle-shaped profile, very typical of streamlining at that time. This particular design was for Wisconsin Ice and Coal, a company run by his future father-in-law. Note the furniture as well. It's not chrome and leather functionalism. It's a more mellow take on modern design with upholstered seats set in wood frames. And of course, it's impossible to overlook the automobile model on Brooks Stevens' desk. There was often an automobile model somewhere at hand, it seems. Brooks Stevens was also a savvy brand manager. As Glenn Adamson tells us in Industrial Strength Design, he decided to use Brooks, his middle name, because, as Adamson wrote, because it was catchier and easier to remember than his first name, Clifford. While many industrial designers set up offices in New York, Stevens did not hesitate in building his practice in his hometown. He always considered his Milwaukee base of operations to be a strength, according to cultural historian Ann Woodhouse. After all, she writes, he was closer than his New York rivals to the sites and manufacturing plants of the Midwest. In 1935, Brooks not only opened his office, he also began seeing Alice Kopmeyer. Her father was the aforementioned manager of Wisconsin Ice and Coal, and her mother's father was president of the Schlitz Brewing Company. Her maiden name was Eline. Like Brooks, Alice circulated among Milwaukee's social elites. And as she said, Brooks stood out from the crowd. She said, actually, all the other guys I went out with were nice, but dull. Brooks and Alice married in 1937, a wedding that was very well covered by the newspaper society pages. They settled into an apartment on East Capitol Drive for a while and soon embarked on building a house in Fox Point. This is the Fox Point area in 1893, and I don't expect you can read the detail, but you can tell just from the look of it that it was still platted largely as farm property. And that's what it was for quite a long time. This is the Whitefish Bay, I think, just down here. They had been incorporated, I believe. But it dates from 1893. By as early as the 1890s, however, well-to-do Milwaukee families were building summer houses in the area. They were displacing the Dutch and German farmers who had settled there, who had in turn, of course, displaced the indigenous Potawatomi. Fox Point was incorporated as a village in 1926, and early planners wanted to attract, as they put it, a more discriminating population, willing and able to pay a premium for a home site in Fox Point. The first zoning ordinance required lots a bit smaller than 1 acre between Lake Michigan and Lake Drive to the west. This is an aerial photograph of Fox Point from 1937. And what I've highlighted there is the property, actually 2 lots, that Brooks and Alice purchased at about that time. It shows in this photo an area that had been farmland being transformed into a community of suburban estates. The eastern part of their property was quite flat and it clearly had been farmed. But further to the west, which is of course to the left, there were trees and so on, and a ravine that headed south and then headed over to the lake to the east. Historical precedent guided nearly all early home building in Fox Point. To the east of the Stevens house were 2 new Tudor Revival houses clad in stone. You see one of them right there. Visible nearby was a red brick Georgian house that you see in the middle. And immediately next door was a clapboard-sided Colonial Revival house. All 3 houses were there when the Stevenses selected the site, and all 3 houses are still there. These were the kind of styles, these revival styles, that appeared in suburbs sprouting all around Milwaukee and quite frankly, all around the country. This is what was preferred. But Brooks Stevens had other ideas. He was focused on the future, not on the past, as he recalled to a reporter in 1981. I felt for me to build a home and have it be a colonial with pillars and all would have been wrong. It had to project an image that would identify me as being an advanced thinker. In other words, it had to embody what we would now call his personal brand. The house would be an affirmation of machine age thinking, demonstrating what cultural historian Jeffrey Mikeley calls a concern for the machine as a production tool as well as a source of inspiration. Here, the machine inspired a house that emerges from its site as if by extrusion, a manufacturing process that pushes a malleable material through a die for a continuous form. Think of pipes and tubing, or weather stripping. A drinking straw is a common extruded form that we see all the time. And there are many food products that are extruded. Most pasta, a lot of sausage, cheese, licorice. So extrusion is all around us. But he saw it as a way to model and shape his house. The result in Fox Point is a dwelling with a constant cross-section. That's what you get with extrusion. Here, a sort of asymmetrical X that rises uniformly to 2 stories. The Stevens house was a physical representation of the machine age ideals of efficiency, precision, and reliability. It simultaneously personified Stevens as a creative businessman and, as he would say, advanced thinker. The Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Sunday News Sentinel appeared around a year after the Stevens house was finished. It described how Brooks and Alice planned carefully before taking their ideas to Fitzhugh Scott Jr., a young architect who graduated from Yale in 1935 and eventually joined his father's successful practice, his father, of course, being Fitzhugh Scott Sr. He and the Stevenses were acquainted socially. The year before he finished working on the Stevens house, though, he had designed a house for himself, a very modern house, that was featured in the Milwaukee Journal. There also is some material on the tables out here that shows some of the interior of that house, which is interesting to look at in the context of the Brooks Stevens house. Now, Fitzhugh Scott Jr. was the architect. Brooks Stevens had studied architecture, but had followed the path of industrial design. It was clearly a collaboration, and Brooks Stevens knew about collaboration because from the moment he started his business virtually, he had additional staff. And he built eventually a very large staff. So he knew how to collaborate, but he was also persuasive. So the general assumption is that it was Brooks Stevens' vision that primarily shaped the house that we see in Fox Point. Now, I want to talk just briefly about streamlined modern in Milwaukee. Not a great deal, but a little bit, because I think it's always a little useful to know context. Now, I'm focusing on Milwaukee. I'm not focusing on Racine, which would be a logical place to think of because the Johnson Wax building was being built at the same time. And I can't imagine that Frank Lloyd Wright would have said it was streamlined modern, but in retrospect, that's what it is. And it's an excellent example, but it's a large commercial building. In the 1930s, streamlined modern buildings had started to appear in Milwaukee, though not in single-family homes. The vocabulary of streamlined modern architecture had developed and included horizontality, flat roofs, smooth surfaces which often covered rounded corners, minimal ornament, sometimes no ornament, ribbon windows, glass block windows, and the occasional porthole window. These three examples may be familiar to you. The Exton Apartment building is in the upper left, and that is the subject of a chapter in Milwaukee Moderns as well. The building on in the upper right corner is the Mariner building, which I think is at the Metro Hotel now. And the one in the middle is Grant's, which I selected. I'm not familiar with this building, but I selected it because it's an example of how you could handle the style when you didn't have much room, when you basically had a flat surface. But basic elements are still there. Okay. In 1938, when the Stevens House was on the drawing board, a streamlined modern house was built on North 86th Street in Milwaukee. That's the Stevens House on the left and the Vanderheyden House on the right. It's helpful to compare the two, the Stevens House and the Vanderheyden House. They are both streamlined modern houses, which makes them noteworthy if for no other reason. They're unusual. Not many of these were ever built in this area. Not many of them were built nationally, frankly. They both use the vocabulary of streamlining, but in very different ways. The Vanderheyden House is a restless assemblage of streamlined parts, including the speed lines, which I have to point out. They're right up here. Speed lines are usually 3 lines of shortening length that became, I'm going to say, just a cliche of streamlined design. You see speed lines on all kinds of things: cars, trains, steam irons, motors. You see it all over the place. And one of the criticisms of streamlined design was this obsession with movement and speed as expressed by the speed lines didn't make sense for objects that weren't moving fast. I mean, I cannot imagine a steam iron really needing speed lines, but they were applied nonetheless, including by Brooks Stevens. But anyway, that's a very different result and composition at the Vanderheyden House than what you see at the Brooks Stevens house. Here, the elemental extruded form that was used is confident, it's disciplined, and it's restrained. More so than in almost any streamlined modern house I've seen. Even outside, most of which I've seen mostly in photographs, this is much more disciplined than those are. The east facade faces the street. The largest window is filled with glass blocks and illuminates an interior staircase. Glass block was a very modern material at the time that had seen significant advancements in the 1930s. The convex wall orients the visitor to a small porch, and and there's a simple entry door with a round window where the two wings intersect. Those wings sort of reach out like they're welcoming you. Come on in. Most of the windows on this elevation are arranged for function with minimal sills and no lintels. They are conventional in size and shape, but modern in their combination of extruded aluminum with stainless steel hardware. The maker of these windows was Adlake, you can change, which proudly declared that they, quote, probably furnished the windows in that fast, modern, streamlined train you admired so much. They in fact had their roots in designing fittings for train cars, but they also got into the window business and other aspects of the business that involved aluminum. And aluminum by this time had become a quintessential machine-age material for design and construction. On the northeast facade, two plain-faced garage doors open to a garage that is consolidated within the extruded form of the house. It's not a mere appendage. All exterior walls on the house, all the way around, are finished with off-white stucco and capped by an aluminum cornice with a very modest decorative pattern on the cornice line. The smooth plaster walls are embedded with thin horizontal aluminum strips, or screeds, that run continuously around the house. The stucco, as you can see, is slightly recessed below each strip. That produces a thin shadow that further underscores the continuity of form of the building and the surface of the building. The screeds also regulated the alignment of most windows and doors in the original design.
Okay. The rear elevation to the west is more articulated, livelier, and open than the street facade. The wing to the southwest, which is to the right, it's off in the distance there in this photograph, is very rectilinear, with plain windows, no direct exit to the large yard. It originally held service areas, the kitchen, living quarters for the maids upstairs, and so on. The wings to the northwest, which are on the left, these are the family spaces, and they're enlivened by curved walls, generous ribbon windows, and a porch that opens to the expansive grounds.
On the first floor, the windows appear continuously from the curved wall of the living room on the right to the at the northwest corner, through the covered porch, and then to the half-round bay of the dining room. On the second floor, the band of windows connects the Stevens sleeping room at the corner, and then it wrapped around to what was originally an open porch. It's closed in this photograph because this is a more recent photo. And then a sitting room, which you can barely see right where the laser pointer is. And then you get the half-round wing, which has fewer windows because that's a bedroom. And so it's not like the room below it. The modeling of the house and the handling of its elevations create a very modern envelope for what is really a fairly conventional interior. This is the house as designed in 1939. It's very evident when you enter the house through what is a very tiny vestibule. When I say tiny, it's about 4 by 4, which means you don't hang out there. You move to the entrance hall as quickly as you can. And that encourages further movement. Ahead to the dining room, right to the living room, or left toward the kitchen, pantry, and rear hall. The rear stairs, which are here, the rear hall opens directly to the entrance, and there's stairs here that go downstairs and access what became a bar room with a fireplace and built-in radio. This plan allows for easy circulation for the family, guests, and staff. The boldest feature is, of course, the spiral staircase, a conspicuously vertical element in an otherwise horizontal environment, with its sleek aluminum handrail, curved wall, and glass block window. The stairs take a 360-degree turn from bottom to top, making a kind of hinge from which the other spaces radiate. The living room, which you see here on the right, is 2 steps below the adjacent rooms. So when you go to the living room, you have to go down a couple of steps. Actually, interesting. You have to go down a couple of steps, the point of which is partly, it gives a little more height to the living room, but it also makes you stop and think before you keep going, and you scope out what's ahead of you. And what's ahead of you, of course, is the sweeping curved window in the one corner and a large porthole window diagonally across the room. At 4 feet in diameter, it's a large porthole. You see it here on the left. Yet it's barely visible from the front of the house. This view through the window is from the future-looking modernism of the Brooks Stevens house across the street to a backward-looking Tudor Revival house. I'm sure that was quite intentional. Okay, you can change. The living room originally featured a long wainscot in plain birch that ran from the fireplace to a built-in cabinet to a narrow window on the perpendicular wall. The room had wall-to-wall carpeting, sheer drapes, simple, narrow cornice trim barely visible in the photograph, and unadorned painted walls. The dining room was handled similarly with more traditional furnishings. It was Alice who probably worked closely with the interior designer that they hired, who was William MacArthur, who's a prominent designer at the time in Milwaukee, and his client list included a lot of important families, including Alice's parents. They lived in a large Georgian Revival house overlooking Lake Michigan. Still, a modern house called for modern furnishings, and by the late 1930s, a modern American style was taking hold. The Stevenses and their decorator reportedly looked to Dunbar furniture as a way to balance the modern with the traditional. The furniture maker had added classic modern pieces to his traditional offerings in 1932, soon after they hired 24-year-old Edward Wormley as their design director. This, again, is not the high functionalism of European designers. Rather, as Marilyn Friedman writes in Making America Modern, Interior Design in the 1930s, it favored, quote, pieces that incorporated the warmth of wood and the comfort of upholstery. We see that here with a wood cabinet that shares the space with a glass-top table, as well as upholstered seating that is both modern and traditional in front of the curved window. Even so, modern materials appealed to Brooks Stevens, who is credited with designing a shimmering buffet in the dining room alcove. Its glass shelf is supported by 2 graceful fronds of clear lucite, which is a high-quality acrylic that was developed by DuPont in the 1920s. Details mattered to Brooks, and he looked at every part of the house to further his personal brand as a modern thinker. If the first floor plan is immediately apparent, the second floor plan is opaque. It's private space for the family that does not quickly reveal its inner workings. There are 2 ways up. One is the staircase, the spiral staircase, and that would be the one that the family would principally use, or if guests were coming upstairs, they would as well. The second stairway and the stairwell at the back is really for the maids. It's for the service staff. And when you get there, you come to a front hall, which cuts diagonally across the space. And you see nothing. You see wall. I'll have a photograph of that in just a moment. But at the center of this space is the sitting room. And that really is the anchor around which the design is organized. The oval sitting room is the heart of the domestic zone, and it connects with other principal spaces, including a bathroom shared with the son's room, which is at the top of the illustration. There's a shared bath there. That would have been shared with the son's room and Brooks. There's a porch over here. That was open when the house was originally built. There's a sleeping room. That was the room for Brooks and Alice, not a very large room. I'll talk about that in a moment. And a long dressing room that runs down this way. That was Alice's dressing area. And then there was a shared bathroom at the end of that. This room over here is the guest room. And while it shares the bathroom with the one that Alice would have had, it's entered through the front hall. You don't go through the sitting room to get to the guest room. Okay. This is the front hall, which is a liminal space. I love that idea. And this really exemplifies that. It is neither here nor there. If you are, in the angle that we're looking at, to the right is the front of the house. And if you go down a bit further, there is an entry to a small porch at the front of over the porch of the front of the house. And the private family areas are all to the left. The railing at the top of the spiral staircase is visible at the right. The walls and doorways are unadorned, and they're uniformly finished with glossy surfaces. This too is not a space to linger, but to move on to the private realm. The sitting room is a traditional space in form and in decor. The tiered ceiling work accentuates the oval shape of the room, as does the bow window, which is integrated within the long ribbon windows that we saw from the outside that open the second floor to the rear yard and to the trees further west along the ravine. The furnishings here are comfortable and informal. The parents' sleeping room, as I mentioned, was small. It was 126 square feet. Still, the 1940 article in the Sunday News Sentinel was captivated by this room because it had, quote, no furniture except sleeping furniture, but the latter is designed on an exotic scale. A built-in bed, the principal article, contains all sorts of appliances, radio, smoking equipment, and other articles convenient to lounging. This is, in fact, kind of about here. You can see there's an open, like a tabletop that comes out and over the bed, and the panels above, at the top of the headboard, open up to allow light. So that you can read in bed, I guess. I don't know if there was enough, but that was the idea, at least in the radio, was over here to the right. This is a kind of a machine for lounging, in a way. And the bed and its paraphernalia personify Brooks Stevens' conception of how to live a modern life. Another aside, a very similar bed appears in the house that Fitzhugh Scott designed for himself. There's a very small photograph of it on one of the tables out here. It's not identical, but since these were being created at about the same time, you wonder who was influencing whom. I don't know. I can only speculate that Brooks was influencing Fitzhugh, but I don't know that. But it was interesting when I saw the article, it was like, oh my gosh, because the rest of the house, from what I can see, the photos are not great that I've looked at of the Fitzhugh Scott house, are not similar to what we see here. But anyway, collaboration sometimes is confusing. Again, the second floor plan. The ancillary spaces on the second floor were given over to living quarters for the service staff, 2 maids' rooms and a bathroom for the maids, a small deck over the entry, and numerous, and I mean numerous, storage spaces. It's an odd-shaped environment, and so any space that was available was used for storage. Brooks and Alice Stevens gave considerable attention to the setting for their house. It was situated close to Gray Log Lane, where it was very visible, still is. There are no fences or gates to obstruct its singular presence. The house was often used as a backdrop to showcase products. In early photos, the house is stark. We wanted to depend on foliage alone to help soften it, Brooks Stevens was quoted as saying in 1981, but he added, that took time. The photo on the left shows the house in 1940, and I believe that's a Packard in front of the house. And the photo on the right is from 1947. So you start to get a sense of what was happening in terms of softening that very stark-looking house. And it was well underway, and it continues. We'll see more photographs from later that show how much more it has softened over the years. The house occupied one corner of the nearly 2-acre site, leaving plenty of room for enhancement. A Boston firm devised and modified landscape plans over 35 years. A Milwaukee Journal article described the setting in 1950. This is 1941, so this description I'm giving you is from another 9 years later. The Stevens home has gardens planted at various levels, descending from the modern home through a rock garden to a creek bordered with wildflowers. Crabapple and thornapple trees are scattered throughout the grounds, near the tennis courts, terraces, and a regularly shaped swimming pool. The pool is surrounded by a land and stone wall covered with vines. At the front of the house, near the driveway, is the formal garden, balanced on both sides of the entrance. Now the pool is this thing, this sort of truncated crescent that you see here. And there was a pavilion, not quite of this shape, that was ultimately built. And just so you know, the landscape architects were Shercliffe, Merrill, and Foote out of Boston. And this other thing to know is that this is upside down in the sense that north is to the bottom. So you have to turn this other side up to think of it as how it looked in terms of its relationship to north-south. Okay, we can switch to this is a more recent photo from 2010. The yard is a large private domain, screened by trees and shrubs, where the family relaxed and guests were entertained, always with captivating views of the modern manor house. This is an aerial view of the site from 1976 that shows the property with its major enhancements in place. The house, or housey, as it says, I think I made an error somewhere here. That's at the upper right. Again, this is upside down. North is down here. So the house is actually at the southeast corner of the 2-acre property. And I'll talk about the expansion of the house. The house here you see has a larger footprint than what you've seen so far, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The tennis court in what is the northwest quadrant was for Alice. She was a gifted player, even in high school. It was added not too long after the Stevenses settled in. The swimming pool and nearby pavilion were added in 1947 and 1948 for the growing family and for Brooks, for whom swimming had been important since he was a boy with polio. Brooks and Alice engaged the same architects, now known as Fitzhugh Scott Jr., as the architects. Jr. didn't get his name on the firm immediately when he joined it. And there's one other thing up here called a fort. That was built in 1955 when the eldest son, David, erected the fort among the evergreens and trees to the southwest. I think that site was acceptable because it really wasn't visible from the house. And so it didn't upset the view, if you will. It became a place for neighborhood apple fights, I was told by Steve Stevens, the second son, and for the boys to work on go-karts and cars. Okay. The expansion of the house, The expansion of the house was planned as Brooks and Alice were expecting their 4th child in 1951. Architect Fitzhugh Scott Jr. returned to devise a wing to the southeast for new living quarters for the maids and the family dining room. Unfortunately, there it is. That's the view we want. You can see how it got larger. This is the wing that was added. The house itself wasn't changed. The plan is unaltered from what we are used to. But as you see, there's a maid's room at the top. That was enough. That was a room. There were to be 2 beds in there because there were 2 maids. Their own bathroom, and then what is called a maid's sitting room. But that apparently was not its ultimate use. It became a family dining room. Because, and again, I learned this from Steve Stevens, because the formal dining room isn't where they necessarily wanted to eat every day, and this was an easier proximity to the kitchen anyway. So that became the family dining room. The addition was 1 story high. As you can see it there in the distance. It did not continue the 2-story massing of the 1930 house, but nor did it compromise the impact of the original extruded form. The exterior of the new wing was consistent with the original. It has a flat roof, aluminum cornice, and aluminum windows. It also extends the stucco walls and the aluminum screed lines of the original house. Any change is imperceptible to this day. Okay, can you go back 1 step? I think I missed an elevation here. That's all right. That's all right. At about the same time, a screened patio adjacent to the living room on the 1st floor became a year-round space with permanent glazing and a flat roof. The open porch on the 2nd floor was also enclosed to expand the parents' sleeping room. They now had more than 126 square feet. Okay, now we can change. The glass blocks on the street facade in that central section were replaced at the instigation of Alice with a new colored glass leaf design that was done, according to Steve Stevens, sometime after 1964. By this time, Brooks Stevens was an acknowledged leader in his field. He had been one of the founding members of the Society of Industrial Designers, either the only member from the Midwest or perhaps one of 2. The point is, most of them were from the East Coast, but he was a founding member. 2 years later, he helped the rugged military Jeep transition to civilian life, here posed in front of the house. When I saw the photograph, what struck me, not so much was the Jeep, but the windows upstairs, because they have frilly curtains in them. What had been a guest room would soon become the daughter's, Sandra's, bedroom. And they're decidedly not modern, those curtains. Anyway, Brooks and his firm designed hundreds of items, from radios, luggage, and appliances, to automobiles, trains, bicycles, boats, a boomerang Formica pattern that's still in production, corporate logos, factories, and the Wienermobile. This is the Wienermobile of 1958, which I think is the first time the Wiener was actually in the bun, as Brooks liked to say. It wasn't on top of it, it was in the bun where it belonged. By 1959, Brooks Stevens and his design staff of 16 had moved to Shorewood. The Brooks Stevens Automotive Museum opened that same year. Still to come were more consumer products and packaging, an unrealized hotel project for downtown Milwaukee, and the Excalibur SS, which was initiated by Brooks but actually manufactured and sold by sons David and Steve. There were honors, museum exhibitions, and teaching at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. But Brooks and Alice sold the Fox Point house in 1985 when his failing health prompted a move to Mequon, which was closer to yet another new design office that they had built, and also to the museum. And the design office by that time was managed by Brooks and Alice's youngest son, Kip. The new owners adapted the house to reflect their lifestyle. Modifications focused primarily on the 1-story wing. The kitchen was updated, as you see here on the right. And what you can't see is that off on the side that way, they took out a wall that had separated that rear hallway from the kitchen before this, and they enlarged the windows on the east side of the house, so they brought a lot of natural light into this now open space, which was much more in keeping with the way they wanted to live. But the kitchen, I think, still acknowledges the streamlined modern lineage of the house in some ways. It's got beautiful terrazzo floors, for example. They also put in, again, you can't see it because it's right through there, a double door from that area to the back patio. There had never been direct access from that area to the back patio before, which was a definite improvement. An entertainment space, which is what you see over here on the right, was created where the family dining room had been. Note the cove ceiling with its colorful mural. You can't see it too well here maybe, but it is a colorful mural, believe me, of heavenly beings, done with a contemporary spirit by still, I think, reflecting its modern environment. A mural in similar style celebrates dance and rises around the spiral staircase and spills over into the upstairs hall, and brings a kind of vibrancy to the upstairs hall it never had when the house was first built. Further changes to the interior have been minimal, and importantly, rooms in the original house still read much as they did when they were built. The modified interior has also brought change to the exterior, again, mostly to the service wings. Windows and doors have been added. This is that double door that now goes from essentially the open kitchen area to the back patio. And then you see that long slotted window and the square window next to it and so on. Those are new windows that affect the new arrangement of the kitchen on the inside. But I think this does not erode the integrity of the original design in any significant way. It's in keeping with the spirit of it. And the one thing that the owners were very careful to do, in spite of these changes, which were, significant modifications to the fenestration, the stucco and the screed lines are absolutely maintained, and they're meticulously done. The landscaping has also been simplified over the years. There's now a smaller swimming pool that's sited closer to the house, but the original pavilion, built in the 1940s, still remains. Change has been part of the house's story from the beginning. The core idea of the house as a design for living is still very much in evidence when you see the house today. This was modern when it was built 20 years ago, Alice quipped to a Milwaukee Journal reporter in 1959, and it still is today. I don't think there's any question of that. In industrial strength design, Glenn Adamson writes that Brooks Stevens' early work as an industrial designer was well within the conventions of streamlined design at that time that dominated the field of industrial design in the 1930s. It was after World War II, he writes, that Stevens, quote, would leave the conformist streamlining of his early work far behind. But he'd already done that when he built his house. This is not a conventional, streamlined, modern design. He, Alice, and Fitzhugh Scott, in whatever kind of collaboration they had, created a special house here in 1939. Here, in the streamlined, modern design that they came up with, the idea is reduced to its essence, and time has shown it to be the most enduring artifact, I would argue, of those early years of Brooks Stevens design. Thank you very much. You can see the people who I wanted to thank, and we wanted to thank generally, really a lot of people, including the current owner, who is very generous with letting me come to the house numerous times. I tried one last time, but the weather was against me. I couldn't do it. But it's really a lovely house still today. I very much like it. The more I've gotten to know the house, the more impressed I am with what it actually is. There's more than just what the surface reveals. I guess there's time for Q&A. If you would have any questions, I can try to answer. Or if you have comments, that's fine too.
Yes, Justin.
So that was a wonderful presentation. It's an amazing house, and I want to go stalk it. Drive past it and scope it out myself.
Well, if you're nice, I might be able to get you in.
So I actually have a question about the exterior color. So in some of the earlier photos, it looks like a very stark white, and it's sort of a softer white now. Is that differences in the photos, or was that?
I don't know, but you're right. It does look much more stark in the original. I presume it was whiter when it was built, but I don't know that because I've not found any description to tell me what the color of the stucco was. But yes, today it's definitely, it's toned down, it's grayer generally. But I don't know the answer to that one. Yes, sir.
You can tell me if maybe this is true or just apocryphal, that there was quite a bit of praise for the house originally. I heard one neighbor said it was the finest Greyhound bus station in the village of Fox Point.
That is a quote I've read several places, which, you know, most people experienced streamlined modern design, architecture particularly, through transportation-related buildings, gas stations, Greyhound stations, and Greyhound actually had a really good program. There was a book about the Greyhound station designs. It's really very interesting, and some of them are still around. And it was a very conscientious plan on their part to be modern. And what better way to do that than to build stations that were expressions of modernism? So some wag decided it wasn't quite appropriate, apparently, for Fox Point. I think it's also important to know that streamlined modern architecture continues well past the 30s. It certainly goes into the 40s and even into the early 50s. When I did a search on the Historical Society's website of streamlined modern in Milwaukee, which is far from incomplete, but it's a way to get a snapshot, they actually show more streamlined design after the war, or after 1940, than before 1940, because you get a lot of gas stations. And one of my first remembrances of streamlined design, though I didn't know that's what it was the parking garage behind Gimbel's. I love that building. I thought it was just fabulous. I mean, it's a parking garage. It's not there anymore, is it?
Yes,
It
still
is?
there.
Good.
And it's protected.
I haven't been down that street for a while. I think it's fabulous. And it made a big impression on me. It's one of those buildings in Milwaukee that made an impression on me as a kid. I grew up in the suburbs, so I didn't get downtown a lot, but when I did, I loved seeing that place. But that's after 1940. So there's actually more of it after the war than before the war, which I think in a way makes the house even more interesting.
May I ask one more? Anyone?
I'm going to go to the gentleman in the rear.
No, please, yeah.
I'm fascinated by this image shows the glass block really well in the big window above the stairs, but is that also a glass block screen by the?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a glass block screen, and that is still in place.
It is still there.
And if you may remember, you may not notice, in the photo of the living room, there was a narrow window. That too was glass block. That's been replaced with regular glass. But yes, but it was, when you look at streamlined modern houses online or in books and so on, some people went crazy with it. And this is actually relatively controlled, I think.
But is it disappointing then that the big glass block over the front entrance, over the stairs, is not there anymore? It seems to me that the house looked a lot better with it there, but I can see why Mrs. Stevens maybe wanted to change it, because you can't see out it. And if you're coming down the stair, having a piece of art glass there in the window would probably look a lot more interesting. But
Yes.
it really changed the front of the house.
You know, there's a number of times it would have been nice to have been a fly on the wall. And when they had the discussion about replacing that, that would have been one of those times. Yes.
So we have the question of the blocks, the glass blocks. Would the lead content of glass blocks at the time be a concern in contemporary architecture?
That's a good question, and I don't know. There's actually a very useful book. I know I quote it and I cite it in the article that I've written about 20th century materials that may address that question, because it's about how the materials were used and how they can be, or if they can be restored. And I don't know what the lead content was. You can still, of course, get glass block. I assume that it's safer nowadays than it was back then. If you could click, I think, go forward a little bit. I want to point something out.
Front or back?
It's near the end. It's a picture of the front of the house. Here, you can go back one. When I was talking about the windows being enlarged, the windows here and here were originally single windows, and they were expanded to double windows. This was done after 1985 when the new people bought the house. So it does absolutely change the look of the house somewhat, but it doesn't wreck it, in my book anyway. It's still fine. And what they got out of that, especially on the first floor, also by taking out an interior wall, they got direct light into the whole kitchen instead of just from one side.
And east light.
And what?
East light.
East light, yes, morning lights, which would have been very welcome. And then if you can go back a little bit. No, go forward. I'm sorry, forward. I can't remember the exact sequence. There's another slide I wanted to point out. Yeah, we won't find it. That's all right.
Okay.
Because I wanted to show another change to the front. Actually, can you go to the end of the presentation? I think it's very, here, that's it. This wall, that's the wing that was added. There was originally a door and the window here that again in 1985 when they redid the house, they removed. Now I've thought about that, and the way I think it works, because it makes this background. It makes this very much a secondary volume and keeps the focus where it should be, which is on the primary volume of the original extruded form of the house. That may not have been the reason they did it, but I think, to me, that's the net result. I think it's a cleaner design without the distraction of a window over there. But keep in mind, it was supposed to be the maid's sitting room, became the dining room. As such, you would want the window. But they're not using it that way anymore. And there's still a window off that way to the southeast. Any other? Yes.
I apologize if you mentioned this and I missed it, but in the primary bedroom, was the furniture still, is the furniture still intact? The built-in bed?
No, that fabulous bed?
I assumed.
No. I don't know when that left. No, it's much more conventional.
Yeah, with
bedroom
modern
now.
lifestyle and all that, I assumed.
Yeah, I don't know how long that lasted. It should have been saved. Should have been given to a museum.
Especially the smoking portion of it.
Yes.
Did you say anything about when they moved out in 1985, when they went to Mequon?
Yes.
Did they build a new house then?
You know, I don't know, because I was laser focused on this building. So I don't know where they ended up living, actually. I know that Steve Stevens lives in Mequon now. I think the Stevens family kind of migrated to Mequon generally.
Yeah.
Is there a car museum out there? Or
No, that closed. I don't know when it closed. It opened in '59, and I think it closed in the '90s.
Yeah, sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, but it's not there anymore. And I don't know what happened to the collection. Apparently it was quite good. I never visited it, but it was a good quality collection of automobiles. Anything else? If not,
I have one more. I wonder, when you kindly allowed me to tour the house with you, I remember one of the things that we noticed was the attention, Brooke Stevens' attention to the knobs and fixtures. And so, as you said, there was a radio both in the bedroom and in the basement. So there was a kind of entertaining space, smoking space after dinner that you could go down to in the basement, and there might have been dances. And I remember, so the knobs, the things that you touch with your fingers, were very much an industrial designer's house. And you remember you and I looked at those aluminum door
Yes.
or window latches.
the window latches, they're
And how different they
double
were.
hung sash windows.
Your thumb and your finger came together on this little latch, and it just moved perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, did you?
They're slightly kind of S-shaped. They're just
Yes.
curved enough so that your fingers fit perfectly. Now, he didn't design those, but he knew enough to pick them.
Now, were those for houses, or were those for the trains?
Those
do you
were
think?
for houses, I
Those were
believe,
for
from
houses.
what I could tell from the Ad Lake catalog.
Okay.
That was one of the photographs I wanted to take on my last visit
Yeah. Yeah.
to the house, because I wanted to show that detail.
Yeah.
But ran out of time.
Yeah.
And then daylight savings time came, and it got dark so early, I mean, it ruined everything.
But I really appreciate that you emphasize the craft in this, and I don't know who the contractor was, but there was a level of precision and attention to detail in this house that you don't necessarily get from the photographs. I think some of the early photographs where you saw the incised lines and the detail you showed was really helpful in that respect, because I think he brought the attention to detail that he would have in his cars and his industrial design products to the house.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't want to say it's remarkable, but it's close to remarkable, I think, on the exterior that whole use of the thin aluminum screed lines was maintained throughout, even to the changes that were made in 1985. I mean, they've been very careful about this house, and I think that must be, I can only imagine going to a contractor and saying, this is what you're going to do. And they figure it out, and they obviously did, but it's really impressive, I think. You know, there's one argument in the preservation world that you should always make, if you're going to make a change, you should make it clear that it's a change, it's not original. In this house, I think they did the right thing by having the continuity of surface and form and everything all around the house through more than 50 years of changes. I think that's exactly what they should have done.
All right, thank you so much,
Okay.
Michael. Yeah. So please take advantage of the time. We have some original drawings, original newspapers, original photography. Our partners at the library do such a great job, I'm not right in front of the screen, of supplying things from the archive and from the collections of the library. So take advantage of those. We'll mingle for a while. We have, I don't know.